Aggregate demand analysis. The aggregate demand curve is similar to a normal demand curve, but there are a couple of differences. Obviously, the labelling is different because we have price level and real GDP, as opposed to micro, which had price and quantity. But the other difference lies with why the curve slopes, or more accurately, why the aggregate demand curve slopes. So the first reason the aggregate demand curve slopes is because higher prices lead to a fall in the value of real income. So in other words, if prices are higher, this takes up a larger proportion of our income, so we consume less. And as consumption is a key component of aggregate demand, there's going to be less aggregate demand. Conversely, if prices are low, this takes up a smaller percentage of our income, so we will consume more. The second reason, if there's high inflation in the UK, this means that we are going to be exporting less. So therefore, exports are an injection to the circular flow, and therefore we'll have less AD. Moreover, a high price level would mean that we are importing more goods from abroad. Imports are withdrawal from the circular flow, so if you add the two things together, we will have a low level of real GDP. Finally, we have high inflation. If there's high inflation, this means interest rates will be high to deal with the issue, and therefore consumption and investment will be low because there'll be more saving and there'll be less loans taking out to fund purchases and of consumer and capital goods. So these reasons explain why the AD curve is downward sloping. So the AD curve can shift, and it can shift to the left or the right. The AD curve will shift to the right if there is a rise in consumption, investment, government spending, or net exports that hasn't been caused by a change in the price level. For example, a reduction in income tax will cause an increase in consumers' disposable income. This leads to an increase in consumption, so there'll be an increase in aggregate demand and a shift in the AD curve to the right from AD1 to AD2. An AD curve can also shift to the left. An AD curve will shift to the left if there's a fall in consumption, investment, government spending, or net exports that hasn't been caused by a change in the price level. An example? Well, a rise in interest rates will lead to a reduction in consumer spending because people will choose to save more. High interest rates also leads to a reduction in investment because borrowing the money to invest becomes more expensive. Both of these factors lead to a reduction in aggregate demand, and aggregate demand would shift to the left. Now, I have not drawn the aggregate demand curve shifting to the right or shifting to the left in this video, as I felt that it was pretty self-explanatory. The multiplier I've explained in more detail in my circular flow of income video. However, let's look at the multiplier again now. The multiplier effect leads to a larger increase in aggregate demand. When there's an injection into the economy, as a result of increased government spending, for example, the AD will shift to the right. However, when money is injected into the circular flow of income, the value of the initial injection is multiplied. This is the multiplier effect. One person's expenditure becomes someone else's income. So the money goes around the circular flow multiple times until it's all leaked out. The effect of the AD curve shifts even further to the right, and the bigger the multiplier, the greater the shift. For example, if a government injects money into healthcare, the money might be used for wages. Some of this money would then be spent by consumers, which would increase consumption. This would cause a second increase in AD, and the cycle will continue until all the money from the initial injection is leaked out. The overall size of the multiplier will depend upon the size of the leakages from the circular flow of income, but it's very difficult to measure in practice. This is partly because There are many time lags, and the multiplier effect of government spending can take years to fully show up in the economy. For example, the full benefits to the government of spending on improving transport links may appear years later. Measuring the size of the multiplier is also made difficult because, like everything else in the economy, it's changing all the time. This makes it very difficult for any government to accurately control aggregate demand. The average propensity to consume or save shows what happens to incomes. Spending and saving are both really important in an economy, and they're basically opposite processes. Money that's spent continues to circulate around the economy, while money that's saved is withdrawn from the circular flow. The average propensity formulas below tell you the proportion of the total income that's either spent or saved. The marginal propensity to consume affects the size of the multiplier. In economics, marginal propensity is often more important than the average propensity. The marginal propensity to consume, that's MPC, is the proportion of any extra income that's spent on the consumption of goods and services. Similarly, the marginal propensity to save is the proportion of extra income that's saved. So you can see on the board here that I've got two formulas noted down. MPC and MPS are important, since the size of the multiplier will depend on how much of an injection of money into the circular flow is spent by those who receive it and how much is saved. Money that's saved does not contribute to another person's income. This means that the more likely people are to spend their money, the greater the multiplier effect. So, if the MPC is low, the multiplier will be small, because any increase in income will only lead to a small increase in consumption. The rest of the increase in income will be saved. Generally, people with lower incomes tend to have a higher marginal propensity to consume. The marginal propensity to consume also tends to be higher in less developed countries, so the multiplier will be bigger. In other words, when you're struggling to afford the basics, you're likely to spend any extra income you get. The formula for calculating the multiplier from the MPC. So you can see the multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC. So let's give an example here. So you can see nice and clearly. If every extra £1 of income earned in a country results in an extra 60p being spent on goods and services produced in the country, then we can see what happens. So, the first thing to note is the formula. Okay, so we've plugged it into our multiplier formula, and you can see that we get to the figure 2.5. So, that's the 0.3. Now that is the size of our multiplier. 0.6 shows our marginal propensity to consume, but with a little bit of maths we can work out the multiplier, which is 2.5. So in a nutshell, what happens is that the total increase in national income will be 125 million. So that's if we inject £50 million into the economy and times it by the multiplier of 2.5. The marginal propensity to withdraw can also be used to find the multiplier. So, there's also another approach to working out the multiplier. Instead of looking at what proportion of extra income is spent, you can instead look at the proportion of extra income that's withdrawn from the economy. The extra income can be withdrawn from the economy by being saved, being paid to the government in taxes, or being used to import goods from abroad. The marginal propensity to withdraw, MPW, is the proportion of any new income that's withdrawn from an economy. MPW can be broken down in the following way. MPW equals MPS, marginal propensity to save, plus marginal propensity to tax, plus marginal propensity to import. Finally, the formula for calculating the multiplier from the MPW. Well, since extra income must either be spent or withdrawn, MPC plus MPW equals 1. This means you can also use the formula, point 2 there, 1 over MPW. So final points to note here. The multiplier will be relatively big if marginal tax rates, i.e. the tax paid on the last £1 you earn, are low. This is because low marginal tax rates, for example a smaller value of the marginal propensity to tax, means a small value for MPW, which means that the multiplier is big because there'll be a higher marginal propensity to consume.